Where is Bitcoin heading? It's a pressing question and one that needs to be answered. So in this video, we are going to break down exactly where we are in this cycle and where we could be going. If you hold Bitcoin or are thinking of picking it up, then this is a vid that you just can't miss. Now, sorry to be a pain, but there's a disclaimer I need to relay. Nothing I say today is in any way investment advice. Okay? It's purely sensational, informational, educational content. So, let's get underway. Before we can take a look at where we are going, we first have to know where we are. At the time of shooting, Bitcoin is a little above 65k, and it has been between 70 to 65k, hovering in that range for a number of weeks. It's also 2 months since one of the most important moments in Bitcoin's market life cycle. I'm of course talking about the halving. This is an event that is usually seen as a precursor to a bull market that sends Bitcoin to all-time highs. For example, in previous halving years, we have seen Bitcoin rally by 185% in 2012, 122% in 2016, and by over 300% in 2020. However, so far this year, we are only up by 50%. In fact, the halving event this year was quite unsensational by historical norms. And that's just because this year was quite unusual by similar norms. For one thing, the actual reduction in the inflation of Bitcoin post-halving is relatively mild. Therefore, the supply shock that many people associate with the halving will be less pronounced. I've talked about this on numerous Q&A videos before, but as we go through many more of these halving events, the impact should trend to zero, given, of course, that the block rewards do. But that aside, perhaps the biggest difference between this and previous halving years is the fact that we have seen the launch of spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US. These have surprised us to the upside and sent Bitcoin to above previous all-time highs prior to a halving. Now, that's something that has never happened before. This, of course, got many wondering whether we may be in a less pronounced and shorter left-translated cycle. Quite simply, it's the idea that the hype has come and gone, and that this will be a much shorter bull market that could end before the end of the year. However, there are others who think that the launch of these ETFs has introduced a completely new dynamic that was not there in previous halving years. The total addressable market for these ETFs is massive. According to a research report by Galaxy Digital last year, it could be as big as $48 trillion. That's trillion with a T. Therefore, many seem to think that we could only just be getting started with these ETF flows. And if we see a broader allocation from registered investment advisors, this could send Bitcoin much higher than the all-time high we saw earlier this year. Indeed, up till this point, the flows have been a massive surprise to the upside. For example, did you know that BlackRock's IBIT fund was the fastest ETF to reach $20 billion in AUM? It did it in 137 days. Now, the next closest was a JP Morgan equity fund that took, and get this, 985 days. It's wild. So, there are 3 potential scenarios of where we are in this market cycle. A shorter, left-translated cycle with most of the gains being seen. Or 2, a traditional 4-year cycle with all-time highs and a market top seen in Q2 of next year. And then 3, a longer, more pronounced super cycle that could send Bitcoin to Valhalla. So, which one is it? We'll come back to that a bit later in the vid, but right now is the time for some price predictions, projections, and general crystal ball glazing. But before we bring out that crystal ball, help a brother out by giving this vid a boost. Tap that like button, smash the subscribe, and ring the bell as well. We've got a lot of exciting videos coming your way. Anyways, back to Bitcoin. Among the most prolific price predictors over the past 2 years have been the digital assets research team over at Standard Chartered. And true to form, they have been making regular updates to their Bitcoin price projections for this cycle. Their latest projection for Bitcoin by the end of the year is 150K. According to Jeffrey Kendrick, the head of Standard Chartered's digital assets research team, quote, "As we approach the US election, I expect 100K to be reached and then 150K by year end in the case of a Trump victory." So it seems that prediction is contingent on Trump coming out on top, but that's something that looks increasingly likely these days. The current prediction is based on analysis from earlier in the year. This centered around benchmarking potential Bitcoin ETF inflows to those of gold ETFs. I'll leave a link to the report in the description for you guys. In that report, they based the prediction on a projection of ETF holdings of between $50 billion and $100 billion. Now, given that the total holdings right now are over $60 billion, it's already above their lower bound estimate, and we are not even halfway through the year. Moreover, BlackRock's IBIT ETF is rapidly approaching the AUM of BlackRock's Gold Fund. Hence, it makes sense that they would want to update their forecasts. They also had a forecast for a 2025 end-of-year Bitcoin price of 200K. Okay, so that's Standard Chartered. Another Wall Street research desk that has a price target on Bitcoin for the top of the next cycle is Bernstein. So just before the halving, they came out with a 150K target by the end of 2025. At the time, they said, quote, "Further integration of spot Bitcoin ETFs with wirehouses and RIAs will continue to provide structural demand for Bitcoin. We continue to expect Bitcoin to touch a cycle high of $150,000 by 2025. Oh, and for those of you who don't know, wirehouses are basically full-service broker-dealers, and RIAs is an acronym for Registered Investment Advisors. This is significant because wirehouse access could expose these ETFs to trillions of dollars of capital. To quote Bloomberg ETF analyst Eric Balkunas, quote, "It's like putting a product on the shelf of Whole Foods or a big food store. Just that kind of exposure and availability is only going to help." Yeah, it's basically like orange candy on the checkout aisle. Now, Bernstein also said that the real supply impact of miner selling has become negligible, something I mentioned earlier. Quote, "We believe it is always new demand catalysts that lead to price appreciation in every cycle." I should note, though, that just last week, Bernstein also updated their 2025 prediction to 200K after they initiated coverage of MicroStrategy. Punchy indeed. Oh, and if you want to position yourself ahead of this potential rally, you'll need to secure yourself a top-tier exchange deal. Over on the Coin Bureau deals page, we have over $60,000 in sign-up bonuses and up to 60% in trading fee discounts, only for a limited time and exclusively for the viewers of this channel. That's down below. Okay, so those are two of the most recent institutional reports we have with price predictions. But we also have some from well-known independent analysts. A pretty neat one that caught my eye focuses on the 4-year cycle and comes from Peter Brandt. Now, he is the veteran chart analyst and the CEO of Factor LLC. In one of his most recent posts, Peter took a look at the symmetry with Bitcoin in past bull market cycles. More specifically, the time in days between the lows of previous cycles to the halving is almost identical to that of the time from the halving to the cycle highs. As you can see here, if you map out the cycle highs, it forms a nice long-term inverse parabolic curve. So we had 490 days from the bottom to the most recent halving. Projecting that out, we would be at about early September 2025, where we could see a cycle high. And if you were to plot the price of Bitcoin on the parabola, we would see a price of about 130 to 150K. Of course, this is just an estimate, and Peter Brandt does say that he sees about a 25% chance that we have topped out this cycle. But it's a pretty convincing analysis nonetheless, and it's interesting that it kind of lines up with that of Bernstein's, albeit with a different methodology. On to another independent analysis, and this is from the real OG of Bitcoin price predictions. I am, of course, talking about PlanB, the creator of the famous, or perhaps infamous, stock-to-flow model. Now, for those unfamiliar, this was the predominant model that dominated discussions in the previous bull market. It basically tried to estimate a price for Bitcoin using a commodity pricing model that examined the stock of the available asset, the supply, to its flow, the new supply. The reason why this was thought to be a good model for Bitcoin is because, unlike other commodities, the stock and new supply of Bitcoin is fully known and predetermined. Therefore, it could be even more accurate than any other commodity price projections out there. Okay, that's cool and all, but what is the price prediction? So, PlanB ran a statistical regression analysis about a week ago, and the results were quite surprising. You can see them right over here. According to that model, we could see Bitcoin at 150K by the end of the year, which is about in line with Standard Chartered's estimates. However, the model also predicts a price of 800K by the end of next year. Now, that seems incredibly optimistic, and there were many who pointed this out in the comments. He also did emphasize that this was just a model. Now, PlanB's model, as with all models, can't be viewed as the written truth. For those of you who have been following this model for some time, it fell short in 2021 when it was predicting 135K by the end of the year. As you no doubt know, Bitcoin got to 69K, but then fell right after that. So it's worth noting that before you bet your kids' college fund on a leveraged Bitcoin position. In terms of other predictions by notable individuals in the space, we had Nick Carter of Castle Island Ventures, who was on a Kitco News interview about a month ago, who said he sees a 100K target for Bitcoin this year, although the exact time frame wasn't given. This price prediction was mainly based on ETF flows, Bitcoin layer 2s, and the upcoming global debt crisis. And then earlier this year, we also had Melton Demimers of CoinShares, who said that she expects Bitcoin to reach 100K based on ETF flows. She estimated said flows to be about between 25 to 100 billion on the back of TradFi investors adjusting their 60-40 portfolio allocations. Oh, and for those unfamiliar, the 60-40 allocation is an age-old investment strategy of 60% in equity and 40% in bonds. Anyways, there are a whole host of other predictions out there, and they range from the reasonable to the outright bonkers. I mean, Cathie Wood is out here projecting Bitcoin to reach 3.8 million by 2030. You go, girl. Now, I won't be going over all of these here, but I will link to this article down below, which collated all of these price predictions earlier this year. But what do we here at the Coin Bureau think? Well, first, let's address that question I posed earlier in the video. What market cycle are we in? Well, I happen to think that we are in a combination of a typical Bitcoin market cycle with elements of a more elongated super cycle. The impact of the halving itself is likely to be negligible on the supply side, and it will tend to zero over time. However, on the demand side, the game is completely different. Those ETFs have provided a super highway for institutions and retail to buy one of the best performing assets of all time. When the wirehouses fully integrate access to these ETF shares and the registered investment advisors start shilling them, the inflows into these products will be gargantuan. On the macro side, meanwhile, things are looking up, with inflation trending lower and a potential Fed pivot predicted for September. The flood of liquidity will bring TradFi back into risk assets, which Bitcoin has increasingly become. I say that because the correlation of Bitcoin to stock indices like the Nasdaq and S&P 500 is at the highest level it has been since 2022. I expect the Bitcoin ETFs to start overtaking the gold ETFs in AUM over the next couple of months. And if you remember what impacts the gold ETFs had on the price of gold in the 5 years since they launched, it was quite significant. And there is one more factor which could be a massive boon for all markets more broadly, but the crypto ecosystem more specifically, and that's a Trump victory. Now, despite what you may think of him as a person, he has come out swinging for the crypto space. And it also seems increasingly likely, like the prediction markets are in his favor. If all of this were to happen prior to the end of the year, then 100K is easily achievable. Then, after that, capital inflows are likely to continue. Let's not forget the total size of that addressable market. Trillions of dollars awaits allocation. And there is a natural self-fulfilling prophecy with the Bitcoin price. Breaking that 100K level will lead to wall-to-wall coverage that will naturally lead to more interest and eventually capital. The price is the best PR agent. Based on all these factors, we could easily see Bitcoin reaching 150K to 200K by the top of the next cycle. And given that I think that we're in a slightly elongated cycle, this could be reached towards the end of 2025. Now, of course, it's very important to caveat a few things. This is based on a few assumptions around the state of the world at the end of the year. There are tail risks, the known unknowns, and black swans, the unknown unknowns. In the case of the former, a delayed Fed pivot, or worse yet, a hike could sap demand. A Biden win could take the winds out of our sails. How about a Chinese invasion of Taiwan? It's all possible. Then, when it comes to the black swans, these could be, anything. That's why they're unknown unknowns. They are the things we do not know. So don't bet your life savings on any Bitcoin price predictions. Seriously, guys, they shouldn't be viewed as gospel. You see, we here at the Church of Coin Bureau preach the good book of DYOR, and our disciples manage their risks. May Satoshi be with you. That's it for my video today. But as always, I would love to get your feedback. So what's your personal price prediction for Bitcoin by the end of this year and then again, the end of next year? What are your thoughts on Cathie Wood's 2030 price prediction? Let me know down in those comments below. And while you're in that neighborhood, you may want to pop over to the like button and give it a tap. Bosh, subscribe as well and ping the bell as well to make sure you don't miss a single upload. Till next time, over and out.